retired Goregri Mugisha Muntu Oyera, Enoch Ruzima Muntu Oyera, and Ida Matama Muntu Oyera to Chitunga village, present-day Ntungamo district, has served in the Uganda People Defense Forces, and he's a Ugandan politician, a flag bearer and president of ANT. We have him today in studio, and we're going to be casting an eye on Uganda's politics, democracy, but also, does Uganda's opposition still hold water? You're welcome to the STV studios.
Thank you.
Environment full of intrigue, backstabbing, and all sorts of things going on. Why are you a gentleman?
Well, I practice what I desire to see happen in our society, because we should live in an environment where people live in a state of harmony, because we are not animals. I mean, when you go like in a national park, you find a situation where the most fierce animals would attack the vulnerable ones.
Yes.
Society is not supposed to be like that. Society is supposed to be governed by rules and regulations and laws. Because if society is left to those who have got the capacity to oppress others to do whatever they want to do, then that society can't be stable. Because the stability and peace within a country, within any society, is dependent on justice. And therefore, those of us who have gone through challenges and have been part of those who try to offer solutions need to recognize that, and therefore practice what we want to see happen.
As someone who's double-sided,
It's the nature of our politics, because in the last 58 years we've had the politics of deception and intrigue and blackmail. It's as if anything goes in politics. However, in life, actually in any society, you'll find that people who are in politics are driven by two things. Some are conscious of it, others are unconscious of it. Even generally in society, there are two philosophies. One is that the end justifies the means.
absolutely.
The other philosophy is that the process is as important as the end state. So some of us are focusing not only just taking power. Power is not an end in itself, but to ensure that once you are in power, then you can use power to change the culture of politics. Currently, the culture of politics is that you can do anything in politics. As long as you survive and as long as you reach your main objective. So the end justifies the means. We don't believe in that.
Absolutely, the end justifies the means.
We don't believe in the end justifies the means philosophy. We don't. I don't subscribe to that.
How do you define Uganda's democratic trajectory as of today? How do you define it?
It's built on a very weak foundation still. That was promulgated in 1995 was a good constitution. But there are two key elements that have been knocked out of it. The amendments which were done, the one removing the term limits, and the last one removing the age limit. That creates a state of uncertainty. And it more or less removes the main safety valves that were inbuilt. And right now, there's uncertainty as to whether we'll have a smooth transition, whether the transition could be turbulent, and therefore that affects the process of democratization that we've been undergoing for quite a long time. So yes, there are some advances that have been made in the last 58 years, but the foundation has been weakened now. And therefore, until we get a smooth transition, and in any case, right now, if we are able to get one leader leaving power and handing over peacefully to another, then we've made a significant step that we've never had in this country for the last 58 years, because we've never had any president handing over. That's a key factor in the stability of politics in any country. We have not experienced it. We hope we will be able to.
Would you then conclude that you're witnessing a manifestation of the exact issues that you went for the bush to fight?
Absolutely. With the deception, with the blackmail, with the use of power in its raw form. That's what causes the injustices and the unfairness we see. And that's what we are trying to tackle. That's what we are trying to change, at least as Alliance for National Transformation. We recognize that, one, while it is important to remove the main roadblock, which is General Museveni and the NRM, that we ourselves must prepare ourselves to do different. Because if we take power when we are not fully prepared, we're coordinated, and ensuring that when we go there, we will be different, then we'll remain part of the vicious cycle that we've been going through for the last 58 years. So there are two key things that we need to look at. Removal of the regime, but also changing the nature of politics in this country. That's the challenge for all of us who are in the opposition. Because at the end of the day, I don't think we're going to be judged by just simply removing a regime. We're going to be judged by how we exercise power thereafter.
Does that mean that Uganda's political style is dirty politics?
Unfortunately, that's what it is as we speak. Yeah.
So if it is dirty politics, I'll move on from your approach to something a little bit different. There's a new wave of young people who want to be given power, if not by peaceful means, grab the power from the old guards.
Yes.
Precisely to say, General Yoweri Museveni, we have Dr. Kiza Besigye, retired colonel, who have been in the realm of the Uganda's politics and the control of politics. Young people want to see their faces represented. And that's the reason you would see Honorable Kyagulanyi, if he stood in this town on this Silbuziga, people will gather around him. Have you felt pressure as the old guards from the young people?
I don't feel any pressure whatsoever, because I'm always focused on the things that I think need to be done. I never bother so much about whatever anybody else is doing. Two, I can never discuss. There's no way I would want to condemn anybody who uses whatever method they want to use. But the most critical thing is whatever methods anybody tries to use. The issue is when you use whatever methods you use and you're able to take power, it is how you manage power that becomes critical in as far as I'm concerned. And age is, I don't see any problem with age, because statistics indicate that we have the youngest population, more or less, on this continent. And I think under 35, about 75%. Yes, which is okay, because one, it means that there is a vibrancy within that population.
We are talking about the young people who are faced with the most harsh situations of life. They're the most unemployed, they're the poorest, the levels of education are questionable. These are people that feel that like they have been disenfranchised in certain way.
And it's understandable. And we encourage the young people to participate fully and actively in shaping the future, because the nature of politics to participate in shaping the future. However, the only caution I normally raise is that age is not the main factor alone on its own, because history itself has shown us that that is not necessarily the most critical factor in governance. I mean, we saw in 1962, for example, the first prime minister, the first president of this country, both. One was 36, another one was 35. The first president was the late Sir Kabaka Mutesa, and the prime minister was the late Dr. Milton Obote. One was 36, another one 35. But the subsequent turmoil in politics, if it was a question of age, then we wouldn't have had that turmoil. Now, even in our own case, in 86 when we took power, I was 28 when I became the commander of the army. Most of these generals that you see now in government, most of them were under 35, the majority of them. 70% were actually under 35.
What has changed in our politics from then until now?
If age was the only factor, then we wouldn't have messed up this country. So
you understand that every time you give us that
must
history,
be twinned with character.
Every time you give us that history, it's like you are triggering the young people in realizing that they have been left out.
Yeah, you see, once the young people now recognize that power requires the exercise of responsibility in managing it, and they add it onto age, then for the first time would have had a possibility of having a breakthrough out of the vicious cycle.
Yes.
The two are very, very critical, because exercising responsibility or having character has nothing to do with age. Because as I've indicated before,
honestly speaking,
you can be a thief at 80, you can be a thief at 30, you can be a thief at 50, you can be a thief at 80.
Very true.
And if you do a scanning in this current regime, you see across all those age groups, people who are thieves. But you can also have other people who are honest across those age groups. So the question, in as far as I'm concerned, is how do you get people of different age groups, different gender, different religions, different ethnic groups, who congregate together and form a core of people who believe in integrity, in honesty, in transparency, in justice, in fairness. The moment you achieve that, definitely will have a breakthrough.
General Muntu, what gives you the confidence that you will garner the numbers that you want come 2021?
We keep
the fact that the demographies have alternated, they've changed from that age group to young people.
Yes.
They comprise of the biggest numbers. What gives you the confidence that you get the numbers come 2020?
We'll keep communicating, because I suspect.
Well, what do you have in your store? What do you have in your basket for the young people?
I don't suspect. I know for sure that across all age groups, there are people who listen, that there are people who are able to understand reason, that there are people who are logical. And our hope is that those who are able to understand reason, those who are able to understand that, you know what, the problem we are confronted with is a problem of bad governance, that the problem we are confronted with, the problem of corruption, of dishonesty, of injustices, and therefore to know that the solution is to be something different from what is happening. We believe that once that, well, I suspect that from what I hear, the message we keep pushing resonates with the people across different age groups. Because if we want fairness, then we must have people who are fair. If we want justice, we must have people who are just. If we want to fight corruption, we must have people who want to exercise power in a transparent way. So we would have to be looking for those who have got that character to do that. And they are not restricted to age, they are not restricted to ethnicity, they are not restricted to religion. That's the only formula. Any political organization that will make a breakthrough, that can turn around the fortunes of this country, must be a political party that has a concentration of people of those categories coming together.
Absolutely.
So I have no problem with the largest population being young, because it is a big plus in terms of how they can invest their energies in the development process and in shaping the future.
As we move away from that, from the demographies changing into young people holding the biggest number of the ballot, don't you think it's time that you would be at least backing someone a little bit younger for an enthusiastic service, stronger service, and you mentor them and nurture them into being the president of the Republic?
That's what we are doing actually in Alliance for National Transformation, deliberately, consciously, in a focused way. That's why we are attracting young people, middle-aged people, old people, men and women who already subscribe the values, because we are a value-driven organization. And therefore, the moment you train more and more, and they have a set of people who subscribe those values and across generations, then we have certainty that where we are heading, that our future is going to be guaranteed and it's going to be good.
Absolutely. Yes. No, a wise man once said that if you want to predict the future or determine the future, that you look at the history. Your history, General Muntu, has been a little bit maybe misunderstood. I don't know how you'd interpret it yourself, but to many people, you have been double-sided. This looking at your history with the former president of the Republic of Uganda, Milton Obote, and what relationship your dad, Muntu Oyera, had with the president, but also having served with General Yoweri Museveni, and have had that relationship. Many have looked at you as a model.
Well, I've heard that, but I never get bothered. I never get derailed by what people say. I wouldn't be concerned if I lost track of the things I believe in. Because internally you would know, if you are someone who believes, for example, in honesty, the moment you do something dishonest, there is something that will trigger in your mind, I know that you've gone wrong. If you don't correct direction and go back on the right path, that's what would worry me. I never get worried about what people say. Because at the end of the day, in life, if you are focused on something, and if it is good and it is right, something that you need to do, and it is the benefit of society, the more you focus on it, the more you remain consistent in pursuing it, eventually it will happen. And therefore, I never get bothered by what people say, because I know that time eventually absorbs you. If what you are doing is right, if you're on the correct path, there's nothing under the sun that will stop you achieving that objective.
Do you have any relationship with the incumbent president of the Republic of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni?
A relationship in what sense?
In any sense whatsoever.
Well, there's no biological relationship. The only relationship we had politically was when we thought that we all subscribed the same values, but the moment we found that he had fallen short of the values that we subscribed to, that's what led to our separation. Because as I've indicated a number of times before, it is not the person of General Museveni that we are following. It is the values that we thought he subscribed to that had become the link point between me, at least, and him. So the moment I found that he had lost direction in regard to that, I continued with the values that I believed in, and he remained where he has remained. And that's where he is now. Yes.
Thank you very much, General Muntu. Let's now look at Uganda's opposition political parties and organizations. We've seen currently defections, shopping from one party to another, movement from one party to another, DP, NUP, UPC, name it. Yeah. We've seen movements. Yeah. What do they make? How do you interpret them?
Two aspects. One, I think people should be free to exercise their rights of choice, wherever anybody wants to go, whatever motivates them, because we are motivated different. There are people who are motivated, for example, like those of us who are in NT, our main motivation is being value-driven. So if you find that there is a party that you want to go into and you believe that it has an environment within it and what it pursues is consistent with what you believe in, then you join that party. But there may be some who are motivated more by how do I take a position? How do I easily get into parliament? How can I easily become LC5? And therefore they factor it in whatever, in the considerations on how to position themselves. And that's why right now you find there are so many candidates on the NRM ticket. 60–70% of them don't believe even in the principles and objectives of the movement, or at least the practices. I bump into so many. But they believe that that's the only area where they can go and they're able to take whatever position they are focusing on. So there are all those kinds of considerations. What do you think inspires
that? Is it, are they following the monies? Are they following strength in terms of numbers?
It's a, I don't know how to put it, but in the process of growth of all of us, there are people who are fully formed, and you find that they subscribe to values that would advance them, but also advance society.
Absolutely.
The others who, in the process of growth, whatever environment they grow up in, they are malformed. You find that people will be able to do things which do not necessarily advance society, but it will advance them as individuals. Of course, when you find a majority of people in politics who are driven that way, eventually there will be conflict, because such people are not going to stand for right, like in the case we have seen, where there is a dictatorship that has been growing. You find that there is a leader who has lost direction, and the people who are in that establishment are not able to stand firm against the wrongs that he does. And therefore, it has a negative in that sense, that people who want to have quick fixes, people who want to take shortcuts, simply to benefit themselves as individuals. At the end of the day, it's a cost to the rest of society. But we have to keep training and talking and discussing these issues so that people get more and more strengthened in terms of character. Really, it's a weakness in character. Because as the Bible says, do unto others as you want done unto you. It's a golden rule in the corporate world. It's also recognized. Because if I want something good, it's what I should do to someone else.
Very true.
But you find inconsistency in terms of how people practice politics. Because someone says, as long as I get to parliament, as long as I get to LC5, and I can take care of myself and the interests of myself and the family, then the rest of society is suffering. The more the injustices remain, the more we are moving towards an explosion. But this person would have participated more or less in that downward slide. But people maybe don't pay attention to it. If they pay attention to it, they may not care. But ultimately, those kinds of actions really aggravate the situation.
Do you think those values are achievable? Because
they are.
Politics and credibility are not known for moving together.
No. Look at some of the countries that on the globe. Look at, for example, the Scandinavian countries. I think the Scandinavian countries have got the best political environment where people are able to live in harmony, at peace, in an environment where they have equal opportunities, where they can access whatever they want to access within the law without hassles. They are not different from us. They are not any more intelligent than we are. We have got the same capabilities that all those who have developed have. But the problem is that a number of us who are in politics want to take shortcuts. And there are no shortcuts in life.
General Muntu, many people believe in you and believe in your systems. They follow you, your followers. Give us a sneak peek into your systems in ensuring credibility as a politician, truthfulness in whatever you say, and vis-a-vis delivering.
There are very, very few people on this planet who do something wrong and don't recognize it. The majority of the people, the moment they do something that is wrong, they recognize it. The institutions that train us, schools, churches, mosques, families, all of us train us to do what is right. Something went wrong, in the process of, in the last 58 years, where the majority of the people, even traditionally, we had strong, stable communities where tradition had trained people. There were mechanisms for training people to be honest, to speak the truth, But now that became destabilized, and we are thrown into the chaos that we are in, where everybody thinks, majority of the people think that, if I don't take care of myself, nobody's going to take care of me. If I tell you a lie, it is okay, as long as I get benefit from that. But at the end of the day, it creates chaos amidst us. We are 45 million people. We are increasing very, very fast as a population. We are going to get 100 million people. If you have 100 million people that live in a society where it's like the jungle law applies, that the more who is powerful, like a lion in the jungle, it will eat an antelope, it will eat a zebra, it will eat whatever. And these zebras, the antelopes, have nothing to protect them.
Perhaps that's the Okwebe, the damn slogan.
If we don't change this political environment, where that even ordinarily the most vulnerable are protected by the law, we are moving towards a larger crisis. And therefore there must be those, one, who know that doing right, being just, being fair is very, very important, even for our own protection as individuals, as a society. Because once those practices are inbuilt within society, it's what creates stability.
Absolutely, very true.
But right now, we have a problem. Those who are in leadership, quite a number of them don't care about justice, fairness, and all that. Then the population has lost hope. They have become so skeptical. They almost have reached a point where they think that there's no way you can have justice, or there's no way you can have fairness, or there's no way you can have transparency. And that's a big impediment, right? But we can't give up. Those of us who know that fairness, transparency, equality before the law, justice are critical components in having a civilized society, we must keep fighting until we achieve it, because we are not different from the countries where they have achieved it.
Absolutely. Now, General Muntu, let's look at ANT, the Alliance for National Transformation. And this is a party, a political party that was launched last year, 2019, in March?
Yes. No, in 22nd May.
22nd May.
Yeah.
Okay. So after the launching, you've been traversing the entire nation, coordinating, building systems underground at all levels. let's look at your preparedness for 2021. Just in case you get office, what is top on your agenda?
First step is to get honest, disciplined men and women of integrity. That's the key factor. Put them in positions of responsibility. Because you see, to implement the manifesto that you have, it is not the beauty of the manifesto. It is the capability to implement it. Because for the last 58 years, we have had different countries, different parties in power, different groups in power with beautiful sounding manifestos. But there has been failure in terms of implementation. So first and foremost, you get good men and women of integrity. You put them in positions of responsibility. One, tackling corruption. There is no way you can eliminate corruption unless you have got people of integrity.
That's the biggest problem this country is having, apparently. And General Museveni is trying to fight, but it seems...
Well, you can't
suffocating
fight
on
because he feeds on it. It feeds into the whole political processes. It's built around corruption and even the rented support that this regime has. All of it is based on corruption. So there's no way they can eliminate the very pillars that prop them up. So whatever you hear from the regime about, the stories about fighting corruption, they're just simply a deception. Anybody who wants to fight corruption, you'll see them in the character of the people whom they appoint in a party. The moment you eliminate corruption, one, you rechannel the resources which are hemorrhaging through corruption. I think the statistics have it around 500 million United States dollars that we lose in a year. So if you channel those resources into the critical areas like health, like education, like agriculture, like infrastructure, power, water provision, then you know that you are stimulating the economy. But one of the things that we will focus a lot on, one, agriculture. Because 70% of the population is in agriculture. So you must ensure that, one, you have got well-trained men and women in the agricultural extension services. You must ensure that you train more and more training in modern agricultural practices, good farm management, improved seeds, the use of fertilizer in areas where you find that soils have got exhausted. The government must invest in the infrastructure for irrigation. You cannot expect the majority of individuals to be able to do that. And then you must also invest in agro-processing or put in place an environment where those who want to engage in agro-processing can engage in agro-processing. You must engage in putting in place the necessary environment and also put in place marketing mechanisms, because that's another problem that you face. Two, there is no way you can expect those who are in farming to succeed if they remain in the current environment where they borrow money on commercial rates.
Yes.
And therefore it is absolutely necessary to have an agricultural bank where they would be able to lend money on low interest rates and long-term repayment periods. Any group that wants to succeed, you must invest heavily in agriculture. Then, and also, of course, cooperatives, because there are many small-scale farmers. And if you are able to put in place an environment where cooperatives can be put in place so they can prosper, they help in aggregating the power of the small producers around whatever crop or around whatever activities that they are engaged in. And investing heavily in education, quality education.
General, before you move on to education,
yes.
I wanted us to discuss the agricultural sector, just like you did mention. I understand where you come from, and I don't intend to downplay your ideas in the agricultural sector. Having been in India and viewed the agricultural system, and being an economics student, which I did in India also, from my research, there is no country globally that has excelled and survived economically
Yes.
on agriculture,
Yes.
on agriculture alone.
Yes.
That means you just have to organize it for a short time
Yes.
and have a strategic movement plan to another sector to sustain
Yes.
the economy.
Yes.
How long will this would the agricultural dependence take? Because for as far as I've known,
Yes.
my lifetime,
Yes.
Uganda has been an economy dependent and fed on agriculture.
Yes, but subsistence, mostly. And that's why any government that wants to, one, move the 70%, because eventually you're going to have rural-urban migration. Eventually, as the country grows, you're going to have more movement from the agricultural sector to the manufacturing sector. Therefore, you'll also be having to create jobs in the manufacturing sector, in the services sector. But also recognize that population is growing. We have got 45 million people. We're going to grow to about 100 million people. If you are not able to produce food, you are highly vulnerable. Any country that is not able to have food security is a vulnerable society.
And COVID-19 has taught us that.
It is a vulnerable society. So you invest in agriculture and you ensure that people are able to prosper, even in agriculture, even as that rural-urban migration happens. Because eventually what happens, depending on the method any government takes, because there are those who choose to empower even those who have got small land holdings. If you are able to train them in good agricultural, modern agricultural practices, if they are able to access credit, low interest rate, long-term repayment periods, if they have got access to good extension services, and also the crops that they can grow on small scale or mixed agriculture, they'll be able to live off that, and they'll be able to get good returns on their investments. And then there are those who find that as long as they're not able to make it in those small scale holdings, they'll be selling. And there are those who will consolidate land and therefore become large scale agricultural farmers. Whichever happens, there must be a lot of focus by the regime in that. So you cannot escape the fact that there must be investment in the agricultural sector.
Absolutely. But
in the short term, even in the mid-term, even in the long term.
Sustainability.
Yes, sustainability.
So
that even those who move out of agriculture, that there must be creation of opportunities in other areas. For example, in manufacturing. But manufacturing at this point in time, the area where you'll find that we have got comparative advantage is in the agro-processing sector.
Very true.
Yes.
General Muntu, sitting here,
investing in agriculture also leads to industrialization in a sense.
Give us, maybe this question would be coming to in an economics context, or to an economics of the nation, an economist. I don't know if we can get a timeline of this transition, because I represent an entire generation sitting here, the young generation, a generation that is quite impatient.
Yes.
Give us a timeline.
I really can't give a timeline, but I know that if there is a disciplined group that is focused on how to invest, first stem the hemorrhage in terms of what we lose through corruption and all that, and then invest in critical sectors. If we go by what has happened elsewhere, we have seen, for example, Singapore, we've seen Malaysia, we've seen South Korea. In a span of 30 years, they have moved from being an underdeveloped country to going into Singapore in the first world. And whatever anybody else has done elsewhere on this planet, we can do. Because I don't think they've got any capabilities that are different from our own capabilities that are God created. We have seen China move from, in a span of 50 to 70 years, moving from being an underdeveloped country to being the second largest economy in the world. And you can imagine they've got 1.3 billion people. So that's a huge leap. And I don't think that that is difficult for us to achieve. The question is getting a critical number of disciplined people who think alike, who act in concert, and I believe between 20 years to 40 years. A country like this will be moved from where it is and it'll be in the first world.
Absolutely.
You know?
All right. Thank you very much, General Muntu. But let's go back to the Alliance for National Transformation.
Yes.
And how you've prepared for 2021. Because this is a time that each party is fastening their laces for the race, 2021. How prepared? What's your campaign strategy?
The lockdown has tremendously affected us, but we are not people who are deterred by circumstances. We keep focused on where we are heading, and therefore operate within the environment as it is. And therefore, since one of the biggest impediments is going to be lack of the holding of rallies, we have got to adjust and use town hall meetings because those are allowed, and also use the media, electronic, print, social media. We are working on the strategy for being able to do that so that we can have the utmost reach in terms of 17 million voters. Because if you are able to reach out of 17 million voters, you are able to reach 100% or 90%, you have an impact, or 80% at the least. If you are not able to access that many, your possibilities for victory would be hampered. And therefore, we are going to do everything humanly possible to access the 17 million voters through the available channels, as restricted as they seem to be, once you knock off the rallies. Well, the unfortunate thing, though, is we see rallies happening now in the rest of the country. Only that the participants are just in the competition, or like those who are in the regime are the ones who are engaged in rallies. The opposition is limited. I don't know after nominations whether the Electoral Commission is going to be strong enough.
Abalamuzi babagamba, if the incumbent president frustrates all democratic means to leave power, temusibayo muntu n'omu kutwiza. This is why Besigye is released. Museveni ekibi kyalina talina mawulire. Nabandika n'ekitabo kyange, the role of which could have been a malicious society. Sapule njijjamu.
Noyingire sabo.
Katonda wa bujja. Nze Katonda bw'obujja. Bw'oba olaga eri, sapule togitwala. Omusajja omubbi bamujja ewuwe ewaka kabanga lyezi. Ne bamujja ewuwe ewaka yabadde mu ttooyi. Naye tebamukkiriza na tusanitize. Bamutadde butwese mu mpikaavu mu State House. Naye omukyayina bwe yawulidde nti ono bamukutte yeesiize kiwi yayitiddeko yadduse ng'omuddugavu.
Hey guys, you're watching STV. Select for fun.
Following a technical glitch, we were discussing the campaign strategy and internal structures of ANT, the Alliance for National Transformation. We have the president right in studio with us here. It's a huge honor to have retired Major General Gregory Mugisha Muntu Oyera in the STV studios. Let's proceed, Major General. Your structure and your campaign strategy, what is it tied on exactly that will give you an edge?
We are now mobilizing around candidates because our effort for building the structures at the different levels, villages, parishes, sub-counties, was destabilized by the lockdown. So we had to shift focus. Now our main focus is on attracting good candidates at the different levels. Councillors LC3, Councillors LC5, mayors, LC3 chairpersons, LC5 chairpersons, members of parliament for constituencies and the members of parliament. Because we know that the moment you get those councillors, for example, at LC3 and chairperson LC3, councillors LC5 and chairperson LC3, because for them, they are more in the population than, for example, us at the national level. They are there 24/7. And therefore, we feed the party messages into them. We are mobilizing resources to ensure that we put it into their campaign. And therefore, they'll be able to build momentum at the lower level. And it's that momentum that will be able to slot in leaders at the different levels until the presidency. Our view is that you cannot bring momentum from up, however strong the leader would be, because the nature of our situation here, besides the campaign itself, you've also got to ensure that there is vote protection. And also once the vote protection process is in place, that we're able to have systems for evacuating the DRA forms. The moment the counting is done, announcements are done, you have to have 100% capacity to get those DRA forms to the Tare Center. That's one of the
so whereas
best check
yes,
to stop those who would want to cheat you from cheating you. If you don't build those capabilities, then you'll be very, very highly vulnerable. So we keep on communicating to people who believe in the values of ANT all over the country to come up and join the ranks of those who are already in ANT in terms of being candidates for councillors LC3, councillors LC5, chairpersons LC3, mayors, chairperson LC5, and members of parliament. And then we'll be able to mobilize in the next 4 months. And it is within our reach to be able to overwhelm this regime come January, February next year.
Amazing approach, General Muntu. So whereas other people's strategy is from up trickling down in terms of structure, yours is from down coming up.
Yes.
From the
because
grassroots.
the population lives down there.
Yes.
That's where the base is. And therefore, if you want to have impact,
yes,
it is there that you must be heavily involved. Yeah.
So from the grassroots. Let's look into your split from the FDC. What inspired your movement from the FDC to form the Alliance for National Transformation? What we know was just after you contested for presidency with Oboy and you lost those elections.
2017.
And then you moved on.
Yeah.
What inspired that? Because when you're moving on, you moved on with quite a huge chunk of the FDC that left the FDC weaker than it is today.
No, there was a problem because we had two strategies. There are colleagues who believe that it is not possible to remove this regime through an electoral process. And therefore that the most effective method would be to organize around civil disobedience or defiance as it is locally known. So that we would remove the regime through defiance and create an environment in which the party could build itself. There are those of us who believe that yes, while that is a legitimate, civil disobedience is a legitimate tool of fighting against the regime, we also believe that the rural population in Uganda is the largest, 70%, and you cannot mobilize them around defiance. And therefore, we thought that the only option in our circumstances that are left to us is to go and organize them down, and also organize the 30% within the the townships, the municipal centers and the cities, so that in the event that those who believe in a defiance would be able to take power before we reached an electoral cycle, that yes, would go into power.
But you realize the damage caused to the FDC.
If they would not be able to take power, and then we go into an electoral cycle like we have done, then we would need to be well prepared to take power through elections. Now we're not able to manage those two. So it's generated a lot of strife within the party. Under my leadership for 5 years, we had strife throughout.
For 5 years, do you realize
yes.
the damage that you had and the impact that you caused to the FDC, the party that you served for 5 years to build strong structures, moving away with almost half the structures, including Dan Mugisha, who is now your head of elections?
It's not damage. It's for the good. Because if we had remained, we'd still be fighting. There's nothing that disempowers people, that demotivates people when they are operating in a state of strife. So our separation created peace on our side because we don't have internal contradictions in regard to strategy. And also I believe it created peace in FDC itself because they can organize and mobilize around defiance without anybody impeding them. So I wouldn't see any reason why anybody would think that our separation caused a problem. People think that for you to work together, that you must be in one vehicle. The only other problem may be that there could be, but that one is you don't see it only in our separation with FDC, because there are other parties which have not separated, but see they are not working together. So cooperation need not be built within a vehicle or a political party. You can cooperate even when you are separate entities. Again, there is still a challenge in that regard. But in NT we recognize that. And that's why we operate in such a way that we don't have any strife with any organization. We have no problems with the people power, we have no problems with DP, we have no problems with JEMA. Even with FDC that we separated from, and we don't have any formal relations, we don't have strife vis-a-vis them. We don't attack them, we don't undermine them, we don't badmouth them. Why? Because we are deliberate.
Does that mean you still your allies? Do you talk? Does that mean your allies? Do you talk?
All the other groups, we've told them that FDC. We are ready to work with them. FDC, we've only informed them that the day we recognize that they do trust us, we will work with them. We don't see them as our enemies. We do not provoke them. We don't undermine them. We take a position where we keep on waiting to understand at whatever point that will happen that they do trust us. And we have told them that. And I don't see any problem at all us working with any other organization once they are willing for us to work together.
Do you talk with your former political ally, Dr. Kizza Besigye?
Well, it's taken a bit of time now, but they are concentrating still on their own strategy while we are concentrating on our own strategy. As long as we are not hostile to them, to me that is the most critical thing.
Recently he came up and mentioned his plan B,
yes.
Withdrawing from the presidential race, and saying he won't be running this time for presidency, having contested for over 6 times. This time he stood aside and said he would come up with plan B.
Yep.
What do you think of plan B? What do you think plan B is?
I've not studied the details of what plan B is. And right now our main concentration is, if you want to call it plan A, if plan A is participating in an election, that's where we are focused. We are not about to participate in any other plan other than plan A at this point in time. As we build ourselves, as we prepare ourselves to overwhelm the regime through an electoral process. Even if that was not to be, the capabilities that we are building can enable us to do a number of things in an impactful way. That's why we don't want to lose focus and go in any other direction.
Very true.
We are people who believe that focus is very, very important. Don't fight on different fronts if you can afford to fight on only one front.
Let's go into issues of governance, but also a little bit of economics. When you look at the diplomatic settings of Uganda as of today and the situations that we've witnessed with different allies, regionally and globally, do you think our diplomatic position stands strong? Because when you're judging the state of the nation, you look at diplomacy and the relations, foreign relations. What do you make of our diplomacy?
I think there is a challenge within our region. Most of the regimes are looking at regime survival. Most of the regimes are looking at how to advance their own small countries. And even what they subscribe to, for example, regional integration, they pay it lip service. The East African integration process had made some fair advances because they signed the customs union protocol. They implemented it, and once they implemented it, within 2-3 years, they had recognized that it was beneficial to all. And then they signed the common market. But they did not put their hearts in it. because they impeded a number of things. For example, like free movement of labor. That hasn't happened yet. And you cannot have free movement of capital and you don't open up for free movement of labor. And then you think that you are going to have the benefits of what a common market is meant to do.
And the African Continental Free Trade Area also in the pipeline.
Yeah, but if you can't work together smoothly at a regional as a regional bloc, how on earth are you going to operate smoothly in 54 countries? I thought you just need to first ensure that within the countries themselves you observe the laws that you establish, and then within the regional blocs. And once you have effective cooperation, then the regional blocs can work together at a continental level.
Very true.
You know, but the biggest challenge I think we notice in the region again is leaders saying one thing and doing something different. Two, the mentality that I think affected the leaders immediately after independence is still at play. Because at independence, I don't remember who said, someone said that African leaders desire to be big fish in small ponds, rather than being
eating all the small fish,
other than being small fish in lakes. Okay. Because I have a feeling that many of them, either because of lack of confidence or whatever psychological negative factors that affect them. Because you see, if you have one regional integrated unit, then many would lose the presidency. I think that affects quite a number of them.
Very true.
They would rather remain in a small country, even if it is struggling economically, than cede some of the powers of sovereignty of the country, cede them to a regional bloc. Okay, have one leadership at the region, even if you no longer have the presidency. I mean, United States of America has got, I think, 52 states. There are governors in those 52 states. They have one president. And you can see how the economy of America is, because of size, because of population, because also of the levels of economic capacity of the people within. So if you have regional blocs, like in the case of East African community, succeed in that regard, because the ultimate was political integration. If you have a well-functioning economy, a well-functioning political system, East Africa with close to 200 million people, and in another 25 years, imagine Uganda alone is going to be 100 million people. So the East African bloc, you'd be talking about 300, 400 million people. That's a huge market.
Huge market.
That would give capacity for a region in many ways. Economic development, political capacity as well, diplomatic capacity as well. Some of our countries are almost, in terms of voice at an international level, in terms of negotiation with the larger economic blocs, are manipulated. Why? Because they are smaller entities, they don't have economic muscle, they don't have any strong political standing, and therefore that weakens us at the level of diplomacy. But many of our leaders seem not to recognize this, or even when they recognize them, they talk about them a lot, but they don't do things in a way that would be able to achieve that end state.
Absolutely. Before we move on from our diplomacy situation and stand as a nation, I wanted to also address the issues of nations and national relations, mention nations and how our relationship is standing as of today. And after that, we shall be moving into economic issues and trade issues and to see how we are standing in that area. Let's look at the situation of Rwanda.
Yes.
Having served as Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces, UPDF, and under you had personalities like Paul Kagame, who is the incumbent president of Rwanda.
Yes.
The situation in Rwanda, what does it make of us? The fact that we had an intense relationship that caused the border closure for a very long time, endangering and affecting our trade relations and all sorts of economic returns that we would have made from that, from our neighbors.
Yes.
How would you make of whatever went on?
Again, unfortunately, there has been mismanagement of the relations between the two countries, because in terms of geographical locations, the two countries border each other. So nobody can wish that fact away. Like Uganda borders with a number of other countries. So for any country to develop on a sustained basis, you've got to recognize the fact as it is that you don't choose neighbors. So you have to do everything humanly possible to ensure that there are good relations with all the neighboring countries, and that you go beyond that and work for common objectives that all of you have got to work towards. For example, in the case of Uganda, Rwanda, South Sudan, Burundi, and Tanzania, they have got a common border with the DRC. DRC, the eastern part of DRC, geographically, can only trade through the eastern seaboard. They can only trade through Mombasa and Dar es Salaam. So the countries which border with the Congo would need to work in concert to ensure that there is stability in Congo. Because once there is stability in Congo and there is economic growth in Congo, it would definitely benefit the East African economic bloc. Now, those are strategic issues that would need the leaders to focus on rather than be sucked into petty fights. Because if you fight, that means you are going to divert resources to building your military capabilities. Now, if you are building military capabilities, it means that a number of other areas will be affected. Education will be affected, health will be affected, infrastructural development will be affected, agriculture and others. So any regime really that has got leaders worth the name of being leaders of countries need to focus on the strategic interests of the countries, strategic interests of the region. And therefore, that should be able to make leaders deal with whatever differences there could be. Differences in approach in terms of whatever political systems each country has. They should not overshadow or impede the critical factor of you investing money into areas that are going to uplift your society, your communities. But strange enough, in this part of the world, the whole of Africa, leaders seem to be, in a sense, intoxicated by power, and they end up doing a number of things that you would not imagine that they would be doing.
Absolutely.
If their focus was on how to develop their communities.
Having a security background, I would expect you to concur with the incumbent President General Museveni on investing more in security than any other areas of the economy. The fact that Uganda is known for having at least the strongest military regionally.
Well, if you have a strong military, but you've got a growing population, and you are getting heavily indebted, and you are not able to pay your debt, for example, you are not able to feed your people, what will force do? Because you can't apply force on a permanent basis. It has a limit. So yes, you can invest in security, but you must also balance. Now, if you are able to establish good relations with all neighboring countries, and you don't feel any threat, basically what that means is that you would now divert resources that you would be heavily investing in security into other areas, into agriculture, into education, into health, into infrastructure, and other areas that will enable you to grow your economy and create employment, create jobs. That's the key factor. Yes, that does mean that you don't invest in security, but you don't invest in security when you are in a sense of going on a war footing, which seems to be the case right now. And some of the areas there can be cooperation, by the way, because if there is stability amongst the nations, like now there are 6 East African countries, if they all have good political, diplomatic relationships, then they can invest jointly in security. For example, if there is an external threat, the whole region. I mean, like in the case of Somalia needs to be stabilized. But they would all co-invest in infrastructure to ensure that they are protected from any other form of aggression or all forms of terrorism like has developed worldwide.
Yeah. In my journalism career, I went to Somalia and I wouldn't want to see that here. Absolutely. But let's move on from security, the state of security, and move on to economics. Look at unemployment, but also the debt burden of Uganda seems to be accumulating each and every day, to the point that today each Ugandan has a debt on their heads. If you dig the math, you'll find that they have at least 1.2 million each Ugandan that is born, if you divide with the population. This debt burden is going to be inherited from one generation to another generation to another, because
inevitably.
What plans do you have apart from borrowing and borrowing?
Discipline.
In terms of funding your government if you got in power?
Anybody who wants effectively deal with the challenge that we do face, the first point of action is discipline. Discipline in terms of expenditure, government expenditure. As NT, the moment we take power, one of the things that we would have to look at is how to reduce expenditure in the area of governance. I mean, I look, for example, the expanding levels of parliament. Just give one example. We now have close to 550 members of parliament. We're a country of 45 million people. India, which has 1.3 billion people, human beings,
and it's also
has got a parliament, the upper and lower house, 600 million. So we are short by 50 to get to where they are.
Yes.
India's population is about 30 times. No, actually 30, 35 times more than us.
More than Uganda's population.
And you can see how our parliaments, the numbers are almost getting close to where they are at. That doesn't make sense.
At all.
So there has to be a review. And a number of other areas in terms of the administration costs.
What has India done different that Uganda hasn't done? They're a developing country just like we are.
Well, I've not, it's not easy to compare India because of the huge landmass and the kind of population in comparative terms with Uganda. But there are a number of countries that we can compare easily in terms of population, in terms of, for example, South Korea, you know, and in the sense that at the time of, at least for us, independence in 1962, there are economies like Malaysia, which were more or less at par in terms of per capita income. All of us were lying within 300 million. South Korea, Malaysia, Singapore. Now, from 60s to now, you can see the leap or the difference that there is between what where they have reached in terms of per capita income and where we are at. Because we are at 800 plus, about $850. That is, if the whole economy of Uganda was distributed to every Ugandan as we are, each Ugandan now would get $850. Look at South Korea. South Korea now is around 25,000 United States dollars. Remember that we are together at 300.
Yes.
Now they have grown to 25,000.
Very small.
We are at 850. Singapore, of course, for its case, it is much, much higher because they are around 45,000. I think Malaysia is, the last time I looked at it was around 10,000. But now it should be more than that because it's been a while since I looked at that. So one has asked oneself, how can all these countries, which were the same level at which we are, been able to expand that fast? And we are still stuck. Again, it is discipline and focus. Because yes, democracy is important as we are building, but in areas that have made those leaps, some of them were not necessarily democratic. South Korea became democratized after a while. So as we grapple with the democratic questions, the issues of governance, we must also look at the issues of discipline. Because it doesn't matter whether you are a dictatorship, whether you are a democracy, if you don't have discipline in terms of managing national resources, the results will be the same. If you are corrupt, if you have got people who are in power who are corrupt, it means that you aren't going to put resources in the critical areas that will become a bedrock on the basis of which you can grow an economy on a sustained basis. Debt. If you borrow, one, if you are not disciplined, it means your processes for negotiations of loans will be weak. But the people who are going to be there are going to be looking for cuts, kickbacks, and that's what happens. That's why I find that in comparative terms, you look at a project in terms of roads, in terms of power, dams, and all that. You look at Uganda, you look at countries like Ethiopia, where there's been a lot more discipline. And you see a wide difference in terms of cost for the same capacity of, for example, power generation, or for the cost per kilometer of tarmac road. So again, that's a question of discipline. If you don't have discipline, it doesn't matter the political system. You'll be, taking your country through raw deals, as we have seen. And the more that increases, and you are not able to focus resources in the productive areas, then that means even the debt that you are building, how will you repay if you don't have the discipline and the focus to invest in areas where there are going to be good returns in investment, and therefore use those returns to pay back debt? So it's a vicious cycle. At the end of the day, that's why those of us who are in the opposition really need to look beyond General Museveni. General Museveni is on the way out. Whether he likes it or not, whatever anybody thinks, we are just going to have change in this country. And therefore we have to think deeply. How do we break out of this 58 years vicious cycle? The only way we can break out is discipline and focus. And high levels also of political consciousness, because it's what really leads us to understand the challenge that we are operating within. So we must invest more time in understanding our environment, in understanding our challenges, and designing solutions that will be effective in confronting those challenges and overcoming them. We must put aside emotion. Emotion doesn't work. We are operating in a situation where we are moving towards a crisis. If we don't do things effectively, the day this regime is out, which is just around the corner. As I've already indicated, 45 million people now, 25 years down the road, we will have 100 million people. Those are 100 million mouths to feed, 100 million lives to cater for in terms of health, in terms of education, in terms of infrastructure. Kampala now, in some places, you spend 2.5 hours, 3 hours in a road jam. Kampala was meant to be 500,000 people. Now, daytime is about 3 million people. So you can project, when we get about 100 million people, Kampala most likely will be 7, 8, 9, 10 million people. So if there is no discipline in terms of how we will build this city and expand it and have wider roads and have plans for how utilities will be moved, you see some of the areas.
General Muntu, a lot of people feel like the change promise has only been paid lip service. And perhaps that's the reason they're running out of patience. People, the populace.
Yes, the population are part of the problem.
Yes, they feel like all you've done is talk. Each election year, all you've done is talk about change,
as the Bible
and
says,
nothing is being
whatever
done.
a man sows, so shall he reap. Our population needs to understand that. However aggrieved they are, and justifiably so, because there are so many injustices, the corruption, the nepotism, the unfairness, the lack of transparency in the management of resources. Yes, that should make people really feel aggrieved. However, the solution or the response, we should not be emotional in our response. We should know that for us to shape the future in a way that will be able to cater for our needs, to cater for our interests as a people, that the type of people, the nature of politicians that we should go in next must be those who have got the capability to handle those challenges. Don't be emotional. These are issues that are critical you know. So being aggrieved and becoming emotional, or at times becoming almost careless in the manner in which we want to respond to these challenges will affect us in the future. I mean, we've been going through that. It's been a vicious cycle. 62 until now. We have had so many changes in government, yes. But the results have been similar. Same character, same characteristics. Corruption,
does that mean the systems in the opposition parties are not ready, according to you?
Come again?
Does that mean that the arrangement in terms of structures and systems in the opposition parties are not ready to take power? We must keep working on that. What is a little bit scary is the debate. You hear on radio, you read in papers, you read in follow talk shows, and the focus is the immediate challenge, which is important because there's no group that is going to manage power better unless the one which is in is removed fast. But see, the two must be moved together. Exactly.
Building capacity to remove the current regime, but simultaneously creating the capability to manage power better. Now, some people seem to be sucked into the removal, not in the management of power thereafter.
Yes.
I can tell you, if we don't focus a lot on that, we may not be able to break out of this vicious cycle.
Muntu, do you
so we can just have a new group coming in, but which simply in culture, in character, could just do the same things
or even
the ones who are in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but Muntu, do you see ANT take power 2021?
It's not out of our reach, and that's what we are focused on.
But you're running out of time.
No, as Harold Wilson, the former Prime Minister of the UK, said, a week is too long in politics. Things happen. You know, there's a shift which is happening right now as we speak in the country. I notice it, I feel it, and we are working, doing everything humanly possible to exploit that situation. And I believe by God's grace we'll be able to take power.
Back to our economic debate. What is ANT's silver bullet to the economic predicament of unemployment today?
Well, grow the economy. Because the moment you grow the economy, then you create jobs. Yeah, there's no shortcut.
What's the silver bullet?
Yeah.
Be very explicit on this.
Yes.
What's the silver bullet that General Muntu, the president of the Alliance for National Transformation, has to solve unemployment as an economic predicament?
First, be disciplined in terms of the people who are going to be put in key positions of management. 2, stamp out corruption, stop the hemorrhage, reinvest those resources on top of the resources that you're able to get through revenue collections. Then invest in agriculture, invest in education, invest in health, because you need skilled manpower, healthy manpower, deploy them well. Create an environment in which those who are in trade, those who are in manufacturing thrive. And through that, you create jobs. There are no shortcuts. Yes.
Okay. So if your economic, in terms of solving unemployment, stands at that level, when you look at...
Because unemployment, if you have got a growing economy, you have invested in agriculture, you have put in place the necessary infrastructure for those who have got the inclinations or the entrepreneurial skills to invest in agro-processing, in other manufacturing concerns, and then also in the service sector. The more you have got an expanding economy, you have an expanding service sector. It creates employment. You invest in agriculture, it creates employment. You invest in in manufacturing, you create employment. Government cannot go in. It is the smallest employer. It puts in place the necessary environment. It puts in place the necessary tax infrastructure to encourage people to go into different investments. And therefore, the moment they grow their businesses, the moment they expand, you also expand the capacity to employ. I don't see any other route that you can use.
COVID-19 has taught
that.
us
Yes.
that dependence on external economic outlook does not work on macroeconomics basis, but rather build internal economic systems for sustainability. Looking at the different sectors like ICT, innovation and science, what areas are you looking at emphasizing in making sure that the economy grows internally and we are not dependent on anyone else outside, like funds and International Monetary Fund, World Bank? What are you working internally to see that the economy has the muscle that is necessary to sustain us through disasters like we've witnessed, the one of the pandemic, COVID-19?
Well, first, there are interlinkages. One, you invest in agriculture, is the largest employer as we speak. That's where 70% of the population is. You put in place the necessary policy frameworks for those who want to invest in industries, to invest in industries. And you also create an environment in which the Ugandan population, first skilling manpower, ensuring that they are healthy, and also conducive, a conducive atmosphere in which they can engage in whatever entrepreneurial activities they would want to invest in. And that becomes part of the growth on a sustained basis of an economic system. Once you have got a population which is able to get good returns on the investments that they make, that means that they'll be able to buy the products from your own factories. And also you have to work on the integration of the regional markets. Once you have that, then you'll be able to sustain your own economies even if there are problems on the outside, as we currently do face. That needs to be the focus.
A synergy in terms.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much.
Because you also have to work on the internal infrastructure in terms of roads, in terms of power. You have got to work on the current issue of the expensive power tariffs. You also have to work on provision of water, the transportation networks, to ensure that whatever is produced can be moved around easily, and also to ensure that it impacts in terms of bringing down the cost of transportation. Because we have got the highest charges, for example, from Mombasa to Kampala. A container for, cost for a container, 20 foot or 40 foot, from Mombasa or Dar es Salaam to Kampala is more expensive than shipping it from Europe to here, or from China to here. So that means there is a problem that needs to be looked at in that regard, in terms of lowering the cost of internal transportation.
General Muntu, I don't know, do you believe in the mafia syndicate that everyone else is crying out and crying foul of in the current government? Do you believe that there is a mafia hand, the invisible hand that everyone talks about? And what is your strategy in making sure that you curtail the mafia invisible hand? If you got into power, I don't know if it's the one that is orchestrating all the corruption that we're witnessing today.
It's an acknowledged fact, because I think so far on record there are about 3 or 4 ministers that have come out and said there is a mafia that is running after them. That means there is a mafia, there is no doubt about that. General Museveni himself has publicly acknowledged that there is corruption, and even I think, I don't remember how many months back, when he demonstrated in public, which basically was an acknowledgement that he had failed in managing it, because if you are the president of the country and you demonstrate on an issue like that, when you are the one who has got the instruments of power that can deal with it, it just basically means that you have thrown in the towel. You have simply said that I can't manage this. Corruption is very, very, very easy to manage, because it starts from the top. The moment you have got whoever the occupant of the State House would be, if he or she is disciplined and not corrupt, and they deliberately appoint cabinet ministers who are not corrupt, and they review the public service and put in people at the control points, the permanent secretaries, the commissioners, and they also put in place people who are not corrupt in managing the parastatal organizations or the authorities in 5 years, you'll have stamped out corruption. People fear going to prison. Right now, corruption is rampant because people know that they will steal and go with it. Why? Because they have links with those who are in power. Those who are in power cannot clamp down on it because it is part of the machinery that enables them to hang on to power. So there's no way they can knock the pillars from below them, the pillars that hold them up. So it's a catch-22 for them. Even if they had the desire to stamp out corruption, they simply are not capable. They just can't stamp it out. So any group that wants to stamp out corruption, one, they must themselves not be corrupt. There's no way you can fight corruption if you are corrupt yourself.
Absolutely.
And again, that's why we must remove emotion out of politics. Let me repeat what I've said before. The Bible says that as whatever a man sows, so shall he reap. So if people want corruption to be stamped out, they had better look for LC3 chairperson, LC5 chairpersons, members of parliament, and the president who are not corrupt. If you elect people who are corrupt and then you expect that corruption will be eliminated, you are just simply daydreaming.
Absolutely. General Muntu, I'll dedicate the last few minutes that we have to conclude this talk show to you, to speak to your followers and those that subscribe to the Alliance for National Transformation. That come 2021, you will get into power, and this is your campaign strategy. Look in the camera and talk to the people.
Our focus as Alliance for National Transformation is on encouraging and attracting men and women of integrity. That's why you start. We need a concentration of men and women of integrity in the Alliance for National Transformation, so that for the first time, we can have those who are not corrupt become the dominant force in a political grouping. We've never had that. We've had honest men and women in this country, but they have always been at the margins because they've always been in a minority in politics. The only solution, men and women who have integrity, out there, don't keep out there in the shadows complaining. Get at the center of the management of politics in this country. There are no shortcuts. Nature hates vacuums. You don't come in, the crooks will remain in there. They'll come more and more, as we see. And then the outcomes is as we should expect. You sow bitter fruit, a seed of a bitter fruit, you reap a bitter fruit. You can't go and reap a sweet fruit from a tree of a bitter fruit. You simply can't do that. We want to change the nature of politics in this country. We want to shape the future to become better. What matters? The character of the men and women who are going to be in governance. There are no shortcuts, period.
Thank you very much, retired Major General Gregory Mugisha Muntu Oyera, for speaking to the viewers of STV. My name is Elijah Tudiagumanawe, and it's been a great honor. Life is so beautiful, ain't it? Having a conversation with a retired Major General in studio like this, a chit-chat. Who knew that would be? Thank you very much for honoring our invitation, Major General, retired at that. You'll allow me to close this particular talk show here. Hope you enjoyed it, and you can keep with the conversation on all our digital platforms. That's on Twitter at STV Uganda, Facebook at STV Uganda. My personal Twitter handle are at Elijah Tudia, and on Facebook, Elijah Tudiagumanawe. Keep it STV. It's a good morning.
Watching STV, select for fun.
Kwa nini kimpigia kusudi zake na kipokea etela uwe nani na namba kakupa nani.
Kusema za ukweli nimepata pigo, moyo umetoboka inauma figo.